to hold and give, but at the right time. You can be slow or fast, but you must get to the line. They'll always hit you and hurt you, defend and attack. There's only
Sounds like he's having a stroke.
Get around the back. Catch me if you can, cause I'm the England man. And what you're looking at is the master plan. We ain't no hooligan, this ain't a football song. 3 lions on my chest, I know we...
They should have used that. To God.
What a missed
opportunity.
I can't believe they even did that. Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with 2 names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all 3 of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
He desperately needs her to survive.
It sort of handled some incredibly delicate topics incredibly well.
I will never watch this again. What was that?
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar.
I'm James Smith.
Let me just go and change my shirt.
All right. Hello and welcome back to our second episode of our Christmas special. This one is about the Muppet Christmas Carol. I am James Smith. I'm doing this all in a different order. I'm joined by James Eatock.
Hello.
And Neil Brock.
Jingle all the high.
Yeah, I had to think of something. And we call Neil Nige throughout this podcast.
We're not even going to try and explain it now. Just be like, here is a statement. We call him Neil, Nige, whatever, get on with it.
It's a statement.
I know. People are probably like, what the fuck? Why'd you call him Nige? That's not his name. But
we just do.
Shouldn't even say you're called Neil. Today, as I say, we are talking about the Muppet Christmas Carol. And just before we start recording, me and Eatock was just saying, I thought this was the Muppets Christmas Carol, and I think I have thought it was the Muppets Christmas Carol for the last, 30 years or whatever. But yeah, Muppet Christmas Carol, which came out in 1992. Nige, I think you suggested this one for us to watch, but I guess first of all, had we all seen this before?
I sort of suggested this to us to watch, but a long-time listener, Chris Knowles, who I've mentioned in previous podcasts, very much suggested this film because it's one of his favourite films of all time, certainly his favourite Christmas movie, and he would be outraged if I didn't at least mention him about 7 times in this podcast. So there's a couple of mentions right there. So yeah, but yeah, I will certainly take credit for this film being on this podcast.
Okay.
And my backstory of watching this. So, do you remember this may be something only for British kids, really, but when I was in school, many, many moons ago, primary school, in fact, around Christmas time, what they would quite often do is get us all in this hall and roll out the TV and the VCR and put on a movie. In the build up towards Christmas, it's like, oh, you're not doing work, we can have a nice relaxing time. And there's a couple of films from that kind of era I remember watching on this wonderful massive CRT TV. One of those was Robin Williams in Hook, and the other one was Muppet's Christmas Carol. The Muppet Christmas Carol. Whatever I call it, it doesn't bloody matter, right? And I remember watching it with my mates, my friends from the school days, like Danners and the Goods and all these people that we sort of grew up watching these films. And yeah, and one of the Goods, in fact, a really dear friend of mine, Alice Good, she is the biggest Muppet fan ever, I would say, and she was a big sort of proponent of this film as well. So I've just got really great memories of watching it when I was a wee nipper.
So I guess we're getting a 10 for this review from
Yeah, another one. Eatock, when did you last see this?
Do you see his little look there? He's like,
cheeky.
I'd never seen this film before, ever. And
oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, so the funny thing is, I don't care for the Muppets.
What?
No, hang on. hang on, I prefer the Sesame Street characters. I love, and Kermit counts because obviously he crosses over. So Kermit, I love Grover, I love Big Bird, Oscar the Grouch, Bert and Ernie, the chisel-jawed news reporter. I love the Sesame Street characters more than because I never found the Muppets to be that funny, whereas I always found the Sesame Street characters, because they were in skits like Grover and the guys always serving soup to, what is going on here? He always had that thing, where he was. Don't get me wrong, I'm not belittling the work of Jim Henson, Frank Oz, all those guys, but yeah, I always preferred Sesame Street.
It's funny you say about like Sesame Street, like this movie, the Muppets. Oh, I'm just going to keep calling it Muppets Christmas Carol, and please don't stop me when I do so. But anyway, this was the first one that didn't have Sesame Street characters in, the first Muppets movie that didn't have that crossover. They sort of basically said, we're going to just do Muppet. And I think it was the first one, and I may be wrong on this, but as far as I'm aware, it's the first one that was kind of retelling another story. And obviously it was such a success for them that they went on to do the likes of like Treasure Island and stuff like that, based on sort of classic literature, I suppose. And for this one specifically as well, it was originally sort of considered to be, they were going to do it as a TV movie or a TV special. And then when they obviously got Michael Caine involved and everyone else, it became a bigger thing. And it was Brian Henson's first project, really, big project after his dad had passed away, unfortunately.
I hadn't seen this personally, so I watched this like maybe, I don't know, when I was like 12 or something. So I haven't really watched it since. So I couldn't really remember this film that well. But they're like throughout even my teens, like I knew the songs, just because at school, like people would sing them, and you kind of know, there goes Mr. Humbug,
there goes Mr. Grimm. If they gave a prize for being mean, the winner would be him.
I kind of knew that. I felt like I knew the film better than I really did, because I've kind of always associated this film with school and childhood, and even the like Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy. Even if you've not really seen like the Muppets in general, like they're such massive kind of characters that have kind of come out of Jim Henson and like this whole kind of universe, as you say, and then even kind of into like the Muppets Babies. I remember watching that as a kid. Muppet Babies.
I loved Muppet Babies. I always watched Muppet Babies.
But those characters have kind of, and Kermit the Frog has obviously gone on into other films and cartoons and adverts.
You better say it like it's Robert De Niro. Yeah, Robert De Niro's gone on to do other films. Kermit the Frog's gone on to other things. He was in that.
Kermit the Frog, like he's an actual actor.
Film,
but
No, in the opening of Saving Private Ryan, when they're storming the beach, one of the actors is Kermit the Frog.
Please don't tell me he's a Muppet. But yeah, so it came out in 1992. It was, as you say, directed by Brian Henson, who Jim Henson's son. And just reading about this, I didn't really realise this, but Nige, I know, will know this. Jim Henson died in 1990, so
54,
a couple of years before.
If you go on YouTube and watch his like funeral with the performers performing, like because obviously the puppeteers for the Muppets and the Sesame Street characters were also the voice actors. So you had Frank Oz, Yoda, obviously doing Grover, but also being the puppeteer. I mean, they're so talented. When you watch that behind the scenes footage, anytime you see the behind the scenes footage of the Muppets, Sesame Street, they're the actors are with their arms in the air, because the camera, they're either on a lowered platform or the camera is on a raised platform, and they're performing, and they are looking at the TV screen, like what's recording. So they're literally looking at the TV doing this, acting. And the level of the talent they have, I think, is almost like otherworldly, because you've got to have such great coordination. And, people just think, oh, you're puppeteering and you're doing the voice. It's like, no, they're acting, regardless of what you think. They're acting. When Frank Oz is doing Grover, or what else did he do? Fozzie Bear. He's acting. It's simple as that. I mean, if you've ever seen like behind the scenes interviews with Jim Henson when he's on a talk show, the host, whether that be like I'm trying to think of the people that have interviewed him, like
Wogan,
Johnny
probably.
Carson or Joan. Yes, there was a Terry Wogan one where he's interviewing Jim Henson, and all the presenters always become fixated with Kermit, because that's how good a puppeteer, a talent you are, is you're basically transferring this personality. You're like, here's the person you should be talking to. And at times, the interviewer will catch themselves and go, oh my God, I'm talking to a puppet. And then he'll make Kermit do that kind of scrunched up face.
The death was completely shocking. Like, it was 1990. He had just done the Arsenal Hall show, so linked to Real Ghostbusters there, I know.
Yes.
And basically had a sore throat and basically said to his partner, I'll probably go away. Had to cancel a voice recording. Then started to feeling a bit worse, woke up in the middle of the night, started coughing blood, really put off going to hospital, and unfortunately that's what cost him. When eventually he did go, he sort of went into cardiac arrest, and it was like a viral infection related to like pneumonia and a condition he had before. And if he'd have got there a couple of hours earlier, they reckon they could have saved him, but it was just too late. And 54 years old, the world at his feet or above his head, I suppose, in terms of doing the puppetry. And there was another really famous performer as well, Richard Hunt, who was so the film was dedicated to Jim Henson and Richard Hunt, who voiced Scooter as well, another one of the sort of famous Muppet characters, and he unfortunately passed away due to HIV. So obviously this film was kind of born out of quite a lot of sadness at the time, but Brian Henson obviously wanted to keep the sort of family business going, and I think this was the first film, and it was the first film as well that he had ever directed. And Michael Caine, who's cast as Scrooge in this, only realised halfway through production that this was this guy's first film, and he was absolutely sort of staggered by that revelation because of the job he was doing at the time.
Then all that work is paying off, 'cause Scrooge is getting worse.
Every day, in every way, Scrooge is getting worse.
And yeah, you mentioned Scrooge there. Obviously, this story is a story that we know very well and that we get recycled every year. I think there's a new Will Ferrell film that's just come out, which is another Scrooge story, Charles Dickens story. But yeah, Nige, maybe you could give us a little bit of a synopsis for the Muppet Christmas Carol version.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you say, it's one of these classic stories that almost everyone seems to know. I hope most of our listeners know, so I don't have to go into too much detail, but it's been done by so many people. Like in recent years, there was the Jim Carrey one. There's even a Quantum Leap episode, which is essentially based on the story of Scrooge. So that's how kind of well known this is. But essentially, our film starts, obviously, 19th century London. Charles Dickens is telling us a story, but it's not the kind of Charles Dickens you're probably familiar with, because he's played by the great Gonzo. So straight away, you know this is a Muppet film, and it's going to have that charm. And he's accompanied by Rizzo the Rat as well.
Rizzo the Rat, I love Rizzo.
Who is described as, and I read this earlier, is like the Greek chorus. And what that means is essentially he is the voice of the audience. He's the one kind of explaining the story or asking the questions. And this was the first Muppets film that didn't have Kermit the Frog as the lead. Instead, Kermit plays Bob Cratchit, who works for Scrooge, played by Sir Michael Caine. And when Michael Caine was offered this role, he said, I'm not doing any of this like dancing around silly in the air. I'm playing Scrooge. I'm playing it straight. And Brian Henson, the director, said to him, that's exactly what we want you to do. So the story is, of course, the classic Christmas Carol where Scrooge, bar humbug, is a very just not very nice person, very anti-Christmas, and it's the build-up to Christmas. Bob Cratchit works for him. Scrooge is very mean to everyone, people in the street and also the people that work for him. And it goes to the point where the night before, well, in the lead up to Christmas, he's visited by a series of ghosts. Now, first of all, he's visited by his former partner, who is in fact like Marley and Marley, Jacob and Robert Marley, played by Statler and Waldorf, the famed Muppets.
That was good casting. That's the best way to put it. I laughed out loud when they were like, whoa, and I was like, oh my God, Statler and Waldorf.
So in the Muppet Show, they were sort of well renowned for being set up in this kind of like the posh seats and heckling essentially the Muppets as they put on a performance. So they work really well as that ghost. And then from there, he's told he's going to be visited by three ghosts: the past, the present, and the future of Christmas, essentially.
Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold to me?
I am.
But you're just a child.
I can remember nearly 1900 years. I am the ghost of Christmas past.
What business has brought you here?
Your welfare.
A night's unbroken rest might aid my welfare.
Your salvation, then. Take heed. Come.
this film's been done a number of times, and there are, like Scrooged with Bill Murray is one of my other favourite Christmas films. But, I don't ever really get bored of this story. This story was written in 1843, and we're still doing it now in 2022, which is incredible that, this Charles Dickens story resonates with people so much. It's kind of gone on for generations and generations, and probably will for another 100 years. And at the heart of it is Scrooge, is the character of Scrooge, in this case played by the brilliant and rather unexpectedly brilliant Michael Caine. He's lonely, he's sad, he doesn't really have any family or friends. So Christmas to him is nothing. It's just another day. And to everybody around him, and in this it's accentuated even more by Muppets, it's one of the most brilliant, like, magical, family, friends getting together. But I think what's really good is how it makes you identify with Scrooge, especially when he goes back and sees his childhood and he says something like, I was always on my own, or something like that. You do feel this empathy towards him, but that his choices have been moulded by his childhood. And I know that this story, this character is in all of the stories, even, I don't know, Mickey's Christmas Carol or whatever it is. But in this case, I feel like Michael Caine does a kind of a fantastic job, kind of contrasted against these Muppets. At the end of the day, that's what they are.
Honestly, I went into this film, like I said, knowing nothing about it. I kind of knew Michael Caine was in it. I was like, okay, cool. I love Michael Caine as an actor. He's been in a lot of great films. Some of my favourite movies, like The Italian Job and Get Carter and Alfie. Great films. I had no idea going into this movie that he was doing this seriously. I thought, oh, Michael Caine in a Muppet film, it's going to be like, he's going to really amp up the Michael Caine kind of, we know that's a trope, slightly like, you're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off. I thought we're going to get that Michael Caine, turned up to 11. I was so surprised how amazing he is in this film. As in, he takes it beautifully seriously. Like, there are times watching him in this movie, like when he realizes that Tiny Tim has died and he's like welling up, and I'm watching it, I'm going, oh my god, I'm welling up, because he's treating this with the respect that it deserves. If he'd gone into this and played it for laughs, or winked, fourth wall breaks or whatever, the whole thing is done with such legitimacy. I was so shocked.
I was a boy here. That's Henry. And Edmund, my best friend. Hello, boys. Hello.
These are but shadows of your past, Ebenezer. They can neither see nor hear you.
Yeah, I think he helps you suspend your disbelief, because as well as obviously the excellent kind of puppetry and all of that, but having a human act alongside, like, basically people's hands or animatronics, and Michael Caine helps you suspend that, and that's not a easy thing to do.
He grounds the movie. He gives it gravitas, and it's like, it's nuts. Like I say, you can, don't get me wrong, you can do serious things in the context of Muppets, like in Sesame Street. There's a beautiful, you probably find it on YouTube, there's a beautiful, really powerful scene in Sesame Street, and you think, like, Sesame Street, what, the kids show, like numbers 1 to 10 and A to Z. See, I learnt the alphabet.
Z.
I'm American. This powerful scene. It was there was an episode of Sesame Street. I don't know if it was in the late 70s or early 80s, when one of the actors, the real actors, had died.
Oh yeah, I know about all this. Yeah.
Oh, the scene is heartbreaking, and it's Big Bird, this giant, like, obviously it's a slightly different Muppet character because it's a man inside a costume. I think he's got his arm up doing the beak stuff, and like the eye movements and stuff. But it's this beautiful scene where the human characters around Big Bird have to explain to him why this character in the show, this man, is never going to return because he died in real life. And it's so fucking heartbreaking to watch, because it's Big Bird, like any kind of child, I guess, learning about death for the first time. And Big Bird's like, but he's going to come back, right? And he's like, no, Big Bird, he's gone. He won't be back. But it's so heart-wrenching, but it's beautifully done. And like that to me shows that there's a giant yellow bird creature called Big Bird, and yet you're able to give that much emotion. And you're like, oh my God, like the amount of times I've watched that and like welled up, because it's so powerful. And that's what this movie, I think, does so spectacularly well, is that it brings out all this emotion, and yet you're looking 9 times out of 10, well, not 9 times out of 10, but half the time you're looking at Muppets. And it's nuts. It's a testament, like you say, to Brian Henson, to Michael Caine, that they treat this movie seriously. They treat the material seriously. But I mean, a young Stephen McIntosh showing up really caught me off guard. I was like, oh my God, it's Steve. That caught me. I was like, we'd obviously done Lock, Stock a few episodes ago, and I was like, it's Stephen McIntosh. So that was a nice surprise.
And Mr. Hooper was the name of the character from Sesame Street as well, the one who died. And he was one of the first people ever cast. Like, I think he was the first actor cast, just like the come go read, like grumpy shop owner, but had that special relationship with Big Bird. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It shows that, well, like the other Christmas special we discussed, like puppetry, like and we've talked about Pixar films as well. There is a way to do these things where it doesn't have to be human to have the most powerful emotions. I think there's been a few films we've reviewed in recent times that have done that exceptionally well, and there's some films that do it terribly badly as well. So yeah, but they're not always great.
But, there's plenty of films with humans that do it very badly as well. Like Wimbledon. But one of the things I found really interesting going back, which I didn't really remember, is, so like you said, like Gonzo and Rizzo the Rat, they kind of narrate, they tell us the story, but they talk directly to us. They are like
the reason they did that,
the audience member.
Yeah, part of the reason they did that is because they wanted Charles Dickens, like the way his story worked, they wanted to be able to use some of that, and the best way of doing that is having someone being Charles Dickens. And obviously, as I said earlier, like Rizzo the Rat being kind of like the voice of the audience, like what's going on, explaining what's going on, giving it that almost that human touch, but as a rat. Yeah, I guess that kind of works.
So we kind of you dip in and out of the story, but then also with the story, the way it's told and acted is like with almost like Old English. I don't know if that is actual Charles Dickens' story or if they've rewritten that.
I think a lot of it is based on sort of that language, that style, and actually using sort of lines from the film, the original
lines from the original book.
Yeah, because the famous speech about when Scrooge is trying to make sense of what he's seen. He's like, you could be a piece of undigested cheese or whatever. Yeah. And that's like, I've seen that in every version of the story. Like that shows up in an episode of The Real Ghostbusters, which also does an episode called Xmas Marks the Spot. So I think any good version of this story will always borrow heavily from the source material, but then interpret in its own way.
It seems to do that a lot in this film, which was, in some ways, it was surprising because, like for kids, which is obviously a big market audience, like having that understanding of the way of talking is probably not that common. So the fact that you've then got Gonzo and Rizzo almost telling it, and then you've got it being retold with that, and then you've got the extra added element, which I think is key to this film, the music and the songwriting, which breaks really out of that and goes into the musical. And without that, it might have been quite hard for children to understand all of that. But then you've got someone saying, well, this is what's happening, and singing it.
It's in the singing of the street corner choir. It's going home and getting warm by the fire. It's true wherever you find love. It feels like Christmas. A cup of kindness that we share with another. A sweet reunion with a friend or a brother. In all the places you find love, it feels like Christmas.
We've got to point out as well, Paul Williams wrote the lyrics, didn't he? The great Paul Williams. Paul Williams is the guy who did like the songs for Bugsy Malone.
Wow.
Yeah, Paul Williams is like, if you look him up, you'll be like, oh, that guy.
Of the Spirit, the message, if we hear it, is make it last all year.
I don't know if you guys have done this. It's kind of related. So I've been to the Royal Albert Hall a couple of times to see films where the Philharmonic Orchestra play alongside the film. So I've seen Back to the Future and The Godfather, but I saw last Christmas they did this, and that would have been an amazing film to go to the Royal Albert Hall with the orchestra, and then seeing how they like combine it with the musical number. But if you get a chance to go to the Royal Albert Hall to see any film with the orchestra, I'd definitely recommend it.
Wimbledon with a
please do.
Both stop bringing up Wimbledon.
Right. I want to go back to a little bit on like Michael Caine, obviously being cast in this role. Like, at the time, like Michael Caine's career has always been a bit hit and miss. Like he's sort of well renowned for taking jobs just to pay the bills. I think he did like Jaws, The Revenge, or whatever it was, and he paid for a very nice house in like the West Indies, and he had a nice holiday. He actually actively pursued this role. Like he'd never had an opportunity to go on the Muppet Show because Michael Caine's a little bit dodgy in some respects. He was on tax exile for quite a long time, so couldn't actually go and film it. A lot of his contemporaries like Roger Moore, John Cleese, Peter Sellers, and even Stallone had told him that the amount of fun they had filming the Muppet Show, and he had always wanted to play the role of Scrooge as well. So it's that sort of combination. And they'd looked at some other people to do it, like Peter O'Toole was considered, like George Carlin, the famous American comedian who shows up in Bill and Ted. He was considered for the role, but obviously Caine was the one who got it. And you kind of mentioned the difficulties in terms of how they do it, the puppeteers being so amazing. And a lot of the time in a lot of the scenes, they removed the floorboards and had obviously the puppets coming up from underneath. And that meant a lot of Michael Caine's scenes, he's like treading on single floorboards because they had to remove so many. So he's almost like doing a sort of tightrope walk at the same time as obviously putting on such a fantastic performance. So, and as you say, like Caine's kind of renowned for being Michael Caine, but in this he does portray the character, and he does actually have that power of his performance. And I think that's a real like testament not only to sort of Brian Henson's directing, but obviously Michael Caine being so up for this, really, I think, as much as anything else. Like you said, he could have phoned it in.
Even though he is odious, stingy, and badly dressed.
Humbug.
Well, like, to Michael Caine as well, he considers this like one of the most memorable roles he's ever done, like to him, which is crazy considering the films he's done. So whether or not that's because he's so enamored with his performance, whether or not it was the experience working with the Muppets, but I mean, originally what they were going to do is, it's rather than have Muppets, they were just going to get a bunch of monkeys and put Muppet faces on each of them. But they started defecating all over Michael Caine, and they were like, I tell you what.
Oh, that's good.
No,
you need to go back and listen to the Gremlins episode if you did not get that reference.
Oh, that was good. I was going to say, like, I just want to talk about the visuals quickly. I noticed some really nice early CGI. When the door handle, like the first instance of Michael Caine, about to enter this dreamlike state, he goes to his house and the door knocker or the doorknob turns into Jacob Marley's face, and it clearly it morphs, and it's really well done. Like, so that must be, you say it's 92, so the film was probably in production around about 91. So I guess we're jumping right off of the back of the black and white Michael Jackson morphing video, which was one of the first times when they did morphing to such a stupendously wonderful. It was just like, wow, this is so convincing. I see one person morph into the next. So I was like, wow. And then I noticed throughout the movie there's some really nice effects. Like there's one when they're jumping through, I forget, I think it's in the past or maybe in the Ghost of Christmas Future. They're jumping through time and they do these really nice kind of portal effects. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, this is made in 92.
Look, it's beautiful, Rizzo.
But you speaking of special effects, like you're saying, they are amazing. The Ghost of Christmas Past were created by making like a special Muppet puppet that was operated in a tank of water and then green screened, and that's how they did it.
Yeah.
But I remember the Ghost of Christmas Future being terrifying. Like when I was a kid watching that, like that ghost was scary. And this story is a lot darker than a lot of the adaptations because, like, Tiny Tim is a lot sicker in this than he is in a lot of them. He clearly has like pneumonia or tuberculosis or whatever it's called. I pronounced that horribly, but you get the idea. He has a very serious condition and he is going to die. And I think I think there's over 140 or 150 different visual adaptations, as in like to film, to TV, etc., that have been made of this. And this is one of the darkest. And it's the Muppets. And it's like, wow. So,
yeah, that is crazy. Even like Miss Piggy is. I know this sounds like such a bizarre statement coming out of my mouth, but Miss Piggy is quite underplayed in this version of the Muppets as well. You know, normally she's
they're true to the roles.
Yeah.
They are, like they actually, and as Etok was saying earlier with the Marleys, like it's so clever how they do it. And the reason why they picked Gonzo for Dickens was because it was like the least Dickens character, so that was the extreme. But everything else, it purposely works really bloody well, and it's the thought behind it is staggering, really.
What I love about it is it just, often we talk about chemistry in movies. It felt so genuine, and I mean, I suppose it's largely in part to these characters already pretty much being established for 20 years, if that. Like the Muppet characters, you already know that Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy have that chemistry, right? We've seen it on like TV, and it's comedic. So you bring it to a movie, and and the actors are basically doing the same roles. Obviously, it wasn't Jim Henson doing Kermit anymore, but they know these characters so well. So when you're asked to do a scene and have warmth and love put into it, they can do it. It's not someone reading a script for the first time. It's like, we know these characters so well. We don't have to act. We are these characters. And I think it's like you said, Smith, it's incredibly well acted by the puppets as well as like Michael Caine award-winning actor. You know what I mean? It's crazy to talk about a film in such a way, but I think it's so true. It's a very well acted movie.
Yeah, well, the humans in general and the Muppets. There's other humans in the film as well, obviously. But the fact that they're kind of all amongst each other together.
Yeah, it's like there's no he's a Muppet and I'm a human. It's all just, they're the characters and that's it.
But obviously, I love the fact that Scrooge is a human. It's something you don't really think about in this film because you just take it for what it is. But actually, they could have had a Muppet as Scrooge. It wouldn't have worked as well. But
and that's what they did. Like in future films, like Treasure Island, for instance, they made sure to have that balance between human and Muppets. And I guess they've always done it, haven't they? That's what the show's all about. That interaction between us.
Yeah, even Sesame Street has characters. Muppets, Sesame Street, whatever. They always have that interaction.
Really, is it? It's never said, "Oh yeah, you're a guy in a bin." Yeah. I guess that bit is, but the fact he's like a
guy in
monster.
A bin, Oscar the Grouch.
I was doing it from like a. Let's not go down there.
And so they arrived in Ebenezer Scrooge's childhood.
That was the worst trip of my life.
Well, it's over now.
Yeah, safe at last. No. No!
Well, I haven't said as well, this film wasn't a huge success, by the way. Like, it cost $12 million.
Was it not?
It only made 27, but it got really hurt at the box office because Home Alone 2 came out at the same time and did a lot better. So fuck you, Macaulay Culkin. I like you really, Culkin. Fuck you, Christopher Columbus. We like you really. But yeah, unfortunately, it wasn't massively successful. But
that's a shame.
2 bits of trivia, because I've only done about 15. One, which is James Smith's favourite trivia of the merry season, is... Did you notice the guest star, the little cameo at the back of, like the scene when they're at the dance, when they go to Christmas Past? None other than British tennis superstar Greg Rosetsky is in the background.
What? So I did not notice that.
Apparently so.
I did not see that.
The rear of the party scene during Scrooge's flashback. So go back and watch that and see a bit.
No. Hang on. You've got that wrong. You're just thinking about a Muppet that's got a really long chin.
Long face.
Yeah. Well, all right.
What was your other bit? That's an amazing bit of trivia.
Well, something we haven't actually spoken about is the fact a very kind of well-known song, well, not a well-known song, a really deep and meaningful song was cut from the original film, and that was done on kind of like the not the producers, but the studio's request. And quite recently, in fact, they've kind of re-added it to the film. And at the moment, it's I think it's about to be streamed on Disney Plus or one of the streaming things in the UK at least. I think it might get a small cinema re-release. And this song's been added back in, and it kind of added a lot more sadness and depth to the film. As I mentioned, this was already considered quite a dark version of A Christmas Carol. So that's why it was cut. But there's scenes afterwards where it doesn't really make sense why Gonzo and Rizzo are kind of behaving in such a way, because this big chunk of the film has been cut out.
Love is gone,
have ever known. The love is gone. The love is gone.
I don't think it hurt the movie by it not being present.
No.
Maybe like you say, is by including it, it strengthens it. But I watched that scene because it's obvious where the cut is when you think back, because he kind of, or she walks out of shot, or he does, I forget, and then it just cuts. Yeah, she walks out of shot, and then you just see Rizzo, I think it is, crying, and Gonzo puts his arm around him, and obviously it's just it's a sad. Yeah. Obviously it's a sad scene. But the reason that he's crying is she's just sang this very emotional scene that is kind of summarised by loss. So yeah, it's I don't know if I'm sure. Like you said, I think watching it again and seeing that scene present, that song present, be interesting to see if it strengthens the movie or if it's just like, oh no, I could live without that.
Yeah, I think that's something we can all do over the Christmas period. But my last bit of trivia, and sorry for elongating this far too long, is in fact that the theatrical trailer, theatrical trailers sometimes steal music from other films. The reason why the theatrical trailer for this wasn't really on video releases and stuff like that is because they used the music from Beetlejuice for Muppets Christmas Carol, which is absolutely bonkers. And also, I've got so much trivia on this film. Jack Lemmon really wanted the role of Scrooge as well. Well, no, he really wanted to be in the film, but he wanted to play Kermit the Frog, and they thought he'd gone mad. So, so he wasn't cast.
Jack Lemmon wanted to be Kermit the Frog.
Well, obviously,
I bet he thought
after Jim had gone, they needed someone else to do it. And the guy who played Kermit the Frog was really, really nervous about doing it, but actually dreamt that he had a conversation with Jim Henson where Jim Henson was like, no, you'll be really good. And then he was really happy to do it, which is another bizarre bit of random trivia.
E-Talk.
Yes, mate.
What do you think? And what is your
I said that as
rating?
if I don't know what's coming. I'm like, oh yeah, what's Smith? So I went in, like I said, not knowing what to expect. It's funny that this is called, the Muppet Christmas Carol, because it's not. At times it doesn't really feel like a Muppet movie, and I don't mean that in a bad way, like disrespecting the Muppets or anything like that, because I think it just shows you how strong and how serious this film is, that it draws you in by saying, hey, it's a Muppet film, but it is a serious character piece with an amazing actor, and he is accompanied by an amazing cast of puppeteers and actors themselves. I think the greatest tragedy of this film is, like Nige was saying at the start, is so, Jim Henson passed away before this film, was made, completed. And it's so sad that he never got to see this, because you got to think watching this film, like, he would have loved it. And it's kind of heartbreaking in that way, because it's like, oh, this is, the first movie they made in a long time, and it was the first movie post his death. And you just think like, oh, you wish he could have seen this, because I wish he could have been a part of it as well. But yeah, I went into this movie not knowing anything, and I came away thinking that is one of the kind of most fun Christmas movies I've seen. And it's you can say, well, the story's as old as time, and it's like, yeah, but it still works. So yeah, I'm going to give this, my rating is a 8 out of 10.
Nice. Maybe I save Nige for last on this one. Let's see.
Present surprise.
I've got to say, as a film fan, I love Christmas films. I love Christmas in general, and Christmas movies always get me in the mood for Christmas, even if you're watching a Christmas film in September. And this is one of those films that will really get you in the mood for Christmas. I can imagine if you've seen this a lot as a kid, it's one of these ones that you'll always revisit and go back to. I did see it as a kid, and like I say, I remember at school, all of us singing all the songs and quoting it, and never really seen it that many times. However, I do have this kind of nostalgic fondness for it, weirdly. I love the story. I love the Charles Dickens story. And I think this adaptation of it is a very clever way of, basically presenting at the time a kids film with this story. Michael Caine, as we've all kind of agreed on, is like one of his best performances, which
pretty
is
bloody
kind
good.
of really weird saying that, but like he's so good, and especially when you look at the films around the time that came out that he was in. Like, I hadn't heard of them. Like Blue Ice, Noises.
Oh, the film he did after this was that terrible Steven Seagal film where he plays like an eco person. Like, I don't know. I've never seen it, but apparently it's...
On Deadly Ground or something?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah,
it's bonkers.
A weird part of his career. And maybe this film is, one of those films that kind of set him back into, what he should be doing. Not that he did this kind of film again, but you know what I mean. But I think how the screenplay and how the music has been adapted from this is excellent. The direction, by Brian Henson is superb, and especially taking over from his dad must have been really hard for him, and challenging to kind of live up to expectation. But yeah, I really enjoyed this film, and I would also give it an 8 out of 10. Nige.
Well, I'm going to preface this by saying if I don't give this film a 10, Nosey's going to kill me. But I'm going to give my fair review on this.
Okay.
Like, you guys have obviously said a lot of positive things about this film, and I agree with all of them. Like, one thing we've not really discussed is obviously like the setting. Like, I think the sort of set they built for this was incredible. Obviously, with all the challenges of actually having the Muppets and the different floor levels and everything else. I've really got a soft spot for this film. I'm not a huge musical person. There's some that I really have a lot of times for, like Little Shop of Horrors. I absolutely adore. Again, that Frank Oz link as well there, who directed it. Yes. But this, I think for me, this is possibly the best Muppet film, maybe, probably. And I think as well, just... all things considered, as you said, off the back of what was a really trying time, and the fact that Muppets may not have even continued beyond that point, that they came back with this, and it's an absolutely fabulous film. Yeah, it didn't do great at the box office, but I think it's one of those films that legacy has lived on through, first of all, VHS purchases, but then being on TV and DVDs and everything else that's come since. For me, I had my rating from before, because I think I rated it on like my IMDb app ages ago.
He's going for a 10, Andy Smith. He's going for a 10.
Well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to be sneaky, because it's Christmas, and it's time for giving, and it's time for presents and sharing the love and everything like that. What I'm going to do is...
You can't give it 11.
I'm going to upset Knowlesy by giving it an 8 out of 10. But what I'm going to do on behalf of Chris Knowles and Alice Good is I'm going to give it an extra point for each and make it a 10 out of 10 for Christmas with those extra points. Merry Christmas, everyone. Muppets Christmas Carol. Go watch it. See it with the extended bit. Let us know if you think it's better with it or without it. Sing along. Enjoy yourself. Eat lots of Christmas food. Make sure you eat your Brussels sprouts. This is a rant. Good day to you, sir. Get yourself a bloody turkey.
And it's off. And what do you think? offradarpod@gmail.com. Tweet us at offradarpodcast.
It feels like Christmas. It feels like Christmas. It feels like Christmas.
Well, that's a bloody treat, isn't it?